everybody. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Get Ready. Very happy to bring my guest to you today, a fellow EFT practitioner who has a very interesting take on the process. So let me tell you a little bit about Rachel Earing. Rachel's the author of The Spiral of Life, and her TAP app is Tap Around the Clock. After spending 20 plus years within the UK television industry, both broadcasting and production, and watching others' masterpieces develop into BAFTA and Emmy award-winning masterpieces, she was enthralled with the emotional journey it took people on behind the scenes to get there. Discovering EFT opened up the doors to a whole new world, and her research background soon took her behind the scenes of EFT and what each tapping point related to each meridian, what emotions and physical symptoms were in each area, and developed her Tap Around the Clock sequence to help her existing clients to have a tool to display at home and share with the family. So welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thank you very much, Brad. I'm delighted to be here.
I am delighted to have you here and to share this. So tell us about what is tapping around the clock and how did this develop?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think I'm the sort of person really that if you're told not to do something, then I will go and sort of ask every single question, why, and what's behind that I don't need to know. But also, I'm a real fan of Donna Eden and the Chinese meridian clock, and the research that I did behind all that sort of led me, as I saw sort of Donna doing all her tapping, that sort of drew me into EFT. And then I was led to have a look at the Chinese meridian clock. And as I sort of started to look at that and actually realised that there were optimum times for each part of our tapping to work on, there was also a weaker time. So I thought that was fascinating in itself because there was like a yin and a yang. And if they balanced out those two tapping areas, such as maybe your spleen meridian and your triple warmer meridian, which is so that's underneath your arm and your gamut point.
Right.
When you actually balance those out, then that flight, fight and freeze mechanism really calms down in the evening. Because your spleen, this one here, is obviously very, very underworked because we never go there. So as I sort of investigated that, I then delved that little bit further and went into, I wonder what emotions are trapped behind each tapping point. So I developed 3 little charts, a negative emotional one, a physical symptom one, and a positive one. And they look a bit like this. And I gave them a client to put out on the walls so that when they went home, they could also engage with the family, because a lot of my clients, and I suppose a lot of the world's clients, their issues really stem from home and home life and that sort of background. So it made sense for me to be able to give them something where people would admit that they actually had emotions, because they had it on a piece of paper, it was on a wall.
Right. Makes it more accessible, yeah.
It does, and I think once people realise that actually it's okay to have that emotion, and it's okay to feel that at some point in your life. I might not feel that right now, but I know that in the past I have felt alone and abandoned and lost, that they were more willing to actually start the process of engaging with tapping at home. So it meant that dads and teenagers were more willing to join in with usually the mums that came to the sessions. And then before long, I realised that the whole family was engaging at home and then either coming in to see me as a family unit or, you know, in twos, really, to sort of work together. So it was becoming a really effective way of working. But I think the best thing is now, that as this has developed, especially with the global situation as it is, the people are actually more consciously deciding that they want to be aware of what is going on with their body and what's happening to it. Well, why does my spleen meridian do this? What's wrong with my spleen? What's wrong with my gallbladder meridian? How can I clear it? And they're actually looking a little bit deeper for reasons why. So it's helping people on that conscious journey as well.
Well, and it makes it more tangible in terms of so many of the things that we experience, and certainly there's so many people who aren't aware of their bodies and are operating from their heads and not aware of what's going on below the neck, which is where everything is, where certainly most of the stuff is going on.
Yeah.
And so that's awesome to make it more tangible in terms of, okay, let's focus on this part of the body and where that emotion is trapped,
Mm.
and getting more clear on what that is. And it would seem to me that as we get more clear on where it is in the body, that allows us to have more awareness of what exactly is bothering us. What was the
Yes.
event, and what are the thoughts about that event?
It does. It really slows the whole process down of EFT, so that when you engage with that one particular meridian for any length of time, it's like opening up a certain chapter of your life in slow motion, so that if you don't actually clear it, you are really feeling what it is, why it's there, and making a real connection with it. And then as it clears, as you work around the clock then and start to clear it, you really start to consciously understand how energy is shifting through your body, where the blockages is, and how it's making you feel as it starts to expel out of you. So people's, like I said before, people's conscious journeys are becoming so beautiful. The feedback now, because this is all now in a course, because as I have wrote the book, then I have developed everything further and deeper, and developed this into a course now, as well as the app and the book, so that we're going really deep into each section and seeing what evolves. And the more you do it, the deeper and deeper it takes you on that conscious journey. So it really is powerful.
It's interesting to see where those points come up. I don't use the specific points in that way so much. There are times where in my work I will focus on the emotions that are attributed to the specific points. I don't do that a lot. Mainly, I'm just going with the
Mm.
flow in terms of train of thought. But there are times where I focus on the points, and there have been times where I encourage people, hey, if you feel that you want to stop on a particular point, go with
Yeah.
that gut instinct. And I remember one time I was having a moment of panic. It was the first time I got on an airplane after 9/11,
Oh, yes.
and I walked down the aisle to my seat, and I couldn't sit down. My body froze, and I stood there for a moment, and then I thought, oh, I could tap. And what was interesting is that traditionally under the eye, the
Mm.
stomach meridian is associated with fear, but it was the side of the eye, which is usually associated with anger, the gallbladder, that it's like, this is where I need to tap.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of fascinating. It was like, I wonder what's going on there, that I had that response.
Yeah, yeah, it's very, very interesting, because, as you say, each person's personal journeys through life will be resonate slightly differently in their meridian system than the next person. So, although there are many patterns that evolve, and we can understand as we're going through the course and working through it, because everything is so mixed up, it really brings home to somebody how important their life journey is and how totally unique it is. Because as they listen to everybody else's stories evolve throughout the weeks, they realise that they're not there yet, but they might want to be. And then all of a sudden they'll have this shift as they're tapping through one particular meridian. And throughout that week, they'll actually see how their whole body, because I feel it's like your body is the bridge. You're going from the negative emotion, you have to cross the bridge to get to the positive. But as you're crossing the bridge, that bridge of energy that changes from one thing to another as it makes its way out, the connections that they make along the way are so powerful and so intimate and so enlightening that only they can experience that.
Yeah, yeah.
And up until that point, they've listened to other people's words. They sort of get it, and they desire to be there. But it's not until they physically experience that shift through themselves that they get it. They know exactly how their life and why it's so important that they had to do that to get there.
Yeah. And I always look at it as the tapping allows us to clear the resistance, so that when we are hearing things from other people, if someone else is talking about their experience, there's a part of us that blocks that because it's unfamiliar.
Yeah.
And as we tap, it's like, okay, I can allow myself now to go through my own experience and make that change. That's to me one of the great benefits of tapping, is just it just
Yes,
reduces that resistance to change, that fear of change.
absolutely. And it brings such compassion. It brings out such compassion and understanding of realizing that no matter what you do or say, you can't make that change for them. That's something that they have to want to work through at some point and resolve within themselves. And I think that's, like you say, I think that's the most difficult part of all our journeys, to know that we can't fix anybody. That is something that has to happen within them. And I get that, because it's usually the people that are closest to you that are your biggest teachers. I mean, my father was one of my, bless him, was one of my biggest teachers, and he passed just before lockdown in March this year. But I'm actually, as he passed, I was actually felt closer to him as he passed than I had done in years and years of him being here, because he was a chronic alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
And he was 86 when he passed. So
Mm.
how, bless him, how he managed to actually live that long, we don't know. But it was his pure will and determination.
A force to
If
be
there's
reckoned with.
anything that man taught me, was that, when you believe something so adamantly, it is amazing what you can overcome. Absolutely incredible. But when he decided to go, he decided to go.
Yeah. Well, and I can see where at that time, then whatever threat that he might have posed in the past was gone, and there was a new opening to have that stronger connection.
Well, he had the understanding then of everything that myself and my brother were trying to communicate with him while he was here. And
Yeah.
obviously, he just couldn't, in any way, physically, emotionally, engage with it, because it was just so alien to him.
Right. Right.
So alien to him. But the messages that we got from when he passed were so deep and so enlightening, and so, wow, moments that, and so beautiful. That connection was so beautiful that, yeah, it all brought it home quite powerfully,
Hmm.
that our journey is not over. It's never over.
Nope. Nope. And yeah, and there are so many beautiful moments that are possible. And as you said, with the through the tapping, as we make those transitions, hopefully while we're still on this planet,
Yeah,
and
absolutely,
not leave
absolutely.
it till those final moments of,
Yeah.
oh, now I get it.
And I
And
think that's the important thing that people need to realize. We can actually feel that blissful experience
yeah,
whilst we're still here. So we might as well.
yeah, yeah.
Why not?
Well, and I love that you've found a way to translate the work in a way that facilitates that differently.
Hmm.
Uh, I've often talked about how healing work to me is like music. And there
Yes.
are many different types of music, different genres. There are different instruments, and different people play those instruments differently. And sometimes people get very precious about a certain way of, this is the only healing modality and this is the only way to work with it. And that's like Keith Richards saying to Eric Clapton, you play the guitar all wrong, man. It's like, no. Some people prefer Eric Clapton, some people prefer Keith Richards, and we prefer it at different times. Sometimes I set my station to classical, and sometimes I set it to rock and roll. And
Absolutely.
so to have different flavors and to say, oh, yes, now I want to experience this tapping around the clock and really delve into the different meridians and what that means and how tuning into that can speak to me and reveal something that I wasn't getting before.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's extremely deep, and it's just a different way of working, like you say. But it blends because it really it's the background really to EFT in a way. It blends beautifully into then using EFT because it gives you that tool to educate people. Because we all want to know more about our bodies, especially children. Children absolutely adore this. And so do the parents because they're actually able to engage with children and explain to them what's happening with their bodies.
Yeah.
And then the children are going, oh right, so my spleen does this and this goes through my heart meridian. Gosh, I didn't know my heart was so involved in all these emotions and physical sensations as well. It's not just a picture in a book. They're actually making really deep connections with how it feels with them, how it feels in their body, what their experience is with that particular meridian, and whether it feels good or bad. And once they get used to their own, then, as we know, getting to know their own energy system about what feels good and what feels bad, they trust their feelings, their emotions, their sensations in their body all the more as to whether they should move forward with that or not. So it's really giving that inner trust some real power.
Right. And the openings that then that creates for their lives, not just for their life, but then all the people that will benefit from how they live.
Well, absolutely.
And that is a thing of beauty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that when the tapping as we know it first developed with Dr. Roger Callahan, and he was first exploring the meridian points and would only work with a few points depending on what the client was experiencing. He'd do a diagnosis and say, okay, you need to use this meridian point and then this meridian point and this meridian point. And I don't know a lot about thought field therapy, but it was certainly from that basis. And then when Gary Craig came along and said, well, let's use all the points. And so a lot of what each point was about then was not as focused on.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's strange because literally just today or yesterday, I picked up today a note from somebody who put something on my YouTube channel and saying, I'm so glad I found this video. And it was the heart and the small intestine, and opposite that is the liver and the gallbladder. So I do a couple of videos which actually blend those together because they're the yin and yangs of each other. And they balance each other out. So as he was working on his gallbladder, because that's what he was having an issue with, he was actually tuning into the others opposite and next to. And he said he went from a 10 to a 4 in just sort of, however long he'd been tapping for, and he was going to continue, but he'd obviously been in quite a bit of pain. So just those 4 meridian points were enough for him. So yeah, I can really, really understand why he started off with that.
Yeah. Now, do you use points other than the 8 main points that are used in traditional EFT? I know there's a lot of other points that other practitioners use, like inside the wrists, around the ear. What points are you?
No, as I was sort of making my own discoveries, really, I tried to keep as much as possible to the EFT points. I use a thymus point as an extra point, but really I just keep to the ones that are literally around the clock, so that it can follow that system. And then I blend it in wherever necessary with all the EFT or any of the other skills that I have, such as MBIR and hypnosis, etc., Reiki. So I class myself as an energy therapist because I blend an awful lot of what I do with each client because it's fun. And I like to have as much fun with a client as possible, and it's effective, and it's very, very effective. So But for the course, we and the book, we just basically use the EFT points that go all the way around the clock, and then we just add in a few extra top of the head, thymus point, really.
Okay. Tell me again, I always forget the name of the top of the head point. That it's the median of many roads.
It's the governing body, really, isn't it, of everything, really? So it goes all the way down.
Mm. I forget there was a name that I once heard. I think it was from Chinese acupuncture of what that was. And I have to confess that I forget what those points are because it's not the way that I tend to work. Although I
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
It was actually from adopting Larry Nim's work with Be Set Free Fast, where he would uh, talk about different points, and that I developed a little pattern that I sometimes use, where I talk about the specific emotions from each of these points.
Mm.
Actually, if you wouldn't mind giving an overview of the points and what the emotions are, just like a Reader's Digest condensed version of what are the emotions that, because people ask me this all the time.
Yeah, of course. So, okay, so what time is it where you are?
It's 10:40 in the morning.
10:40 in the morning. Okay, so that's actually spleen time. So between 9 a.m. and 11 p.m. 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. that's sort of spleen optimum time. So obviously you're tapping under there, and that's real. So that's a sort of anxiety, despair, disgust, worry, failure. If I go over to some of the positive ones, then we've got being calm and relaxed, caring, in control, self-assured, inventive, creative, and being abundant. Then it goes on to the heart meridian, which is the inside of the little finger. And that optimum time is between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. So that's unconditional love, of course. Unconditional love, peace, feeling safe and content, or lost, alone and abandoned. Now, the small intestine, because what actually happens is the heart meridian and the small intestine, which is the outside, which that's between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m.,
Mm.
they sort of blend a lot of the emotions under those two banners. There's quite a lot that actually repeat in a way. So again, good judgment, clear focus, high self-esteem, very understanding of situations, or sadness, vulnerable, tired and empty, forgetful. Yeah, so there's all sorts of brain fog, feeling lost again. The bladder, so that's between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. Obviously, this is very much about being responsible, strong, good willpower, confident, which if you think about your bladder and what it's actually holding in, it actually makes sense that you need to be responsible to actually hold all that fluid in. And when we're not being responsible, this is why a lot of it then actually comes back to childhood, because if you don't want to be potty trained and you don't want to come out of nappies, we don't want that responsibility, do we? So yeah, so it's quite nice to blame others. And
So instead of wearing Depends, we can just be tapping the
yeah, absolutely. I don't want to be. There's a lot of people that don't want to take any responsibility right now. They want to be looked after. They want to be nurtured. Yeah, and so that's why the bladder and the kidney meridian really are very apparent, really, with all the symptoms that are going on at the moment, because they want to be cared for, they want to be nurtured, and not to be able to do that themselves, because it's hard work. And if they've not done that really, up until this point, then where do they even begin? Where do they even begin? And then that moves on to the kidney. So your bladder and your kidney meridian are very much related. So that's between 5 and 7 p.m. for the kidney. Pericardium, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. So this is where we then start to become quite anxious and worried as we go into the evening between 7 and 9. Lots of jealousy, humiliation, those longing type feelings that come in, lustful, because your pericardium is very much about your circulation and sexual organs. So when we're feeling like we're not getting something that we really want, all those emotions can really start to kick in the evening, and then that feeds through into our fight, flight, and freeze mechanism, which is here, our gamut point, which are triple warmer. And I tend to actually encourage people to hold this point quite a little bit instead of just tapping on it, because that's quite a calming thing to do. And again, this is the one that's opposite your spleen. So if your spleen has been underworked from the morning, and this one sort of then takes over, and it builds and builds and builds in the evening, then it's really nice to calm this one down by holding it. And that's very much arrogance, shame. There's a lot of shame in there, shock, unworthiness. And then we go on to gallbladder. So the gallbladder and the liver, which is sort of, as we know, should I stand up? I'll struggle here.
The under the breast point.
So, under the breast point, under there. So anger, bitterness, guilt, resentment, panic, depression, real intensity, frustration, indecisiveness. All happy and loving and kind and sweet-natured and helpful and compassionate and calm, courageous. Yeah, so all of those really are really nice points. So that's probably why you wanted to tap here for your gallbladder, because when you were on the plane, you wanted to be strong and courageous and brave. So that was a really good point to tap on. And then that feeds through. So sorry, your gallbladder is 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. Your liver is 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. And then we go on to the lungs, which is the outside of the thumb. And this has been encouraging and welcoming and feeling free and joyful. So it's all those expressions of where your lungs will be open, really, and free, and integrity, and those sort of feelings, flexibility, expressive. And again, the same with the large intestine, which goes on from that, which is your index finger, 5 to 7 a.m. So the negative ones are there where you're feeling grief, rejection, and confusion. So again, in the present climate, these are really good ones to be tapping on, because we're all confused. We're all feeling defensive and a little bit sad and ashamed, and tend to go into self-sabotage type mode as well. So it covers all those. And then we go from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. We're back in again with the spleen, because it's back to the stomach meridian then, and the stomach and the spleen are very connected. So it's about obsessive, addiction, distrustful, not achieving, or being very abundant and helpful and in control type things. So there's a lot more, but that gives a rough idea.
Yeah, awesome. It's great, because a lot of people do ask around that, so that's a great primer for this. And of course, in your book and in your program, a much deeper dive into these points and how to use them to get to those beautiful moments.
Yes, absolutely, because everything I've just said are just words. It's really connecting with each emotion and experiencing it and making that transition through this body to get to the other side of that real joy and beautiful connection. That's the journey. That's the beautiful part. That's where we all go, oh wow, that's what's just happened. Wow, this is fantastic. And then when you start on that journey, it's like, oh, well, I wonder what happens next. So people want to continue the journey because it's all about them. And there's nothing more exciting than you, is there?
Yeah. Tends to be our favorite subject.
Absolutely.
Well, awesome. That's so cool. And thank you so much for sharing this with us, and this introduction to get to those beautiful moments and to get to that place of what's next, and really enjoying life at a whole new level. So I greatly appreciate that you've taken this journey, and that you're sharing this work.
Oh, it's been my pleasure to be here with you, and an absolute pleasure to share what I'm doing with everybody else. So yeah, enjoy the journey, folks, and be creative. Just be creative and experiment, and the most amazing things happen.
Here's to amazing things. And of course,
Absolutely.
links to all of Rachel's offerings will be at tapwithbrad.com/Rachel. And you can check that out and take that deeper dive to get to those beautiful moments. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Brad.